Sequels are inherently difficult. To even get to a sequel, you need an original that's very good. And that means that the follow-up's always going to be measured against the greatness of its predecessor. To make things even more complicated, the sequel's got to pay homage to the original without being a total copycat. And that brings us to this, the E36 M3, which was BMW's follow-up to the original E30 M3. Although many have suffered the sophomore slump, the E36 M3 is not one of them.
Now, the E36 has long been the black sheep of the BMW Motorsports family because it's essentially a watered-down version of a full-bodied Euro car, but I don't think it's deserving of that outcast status. In fact, I think the US car is actually better than the European one.
So here's the biggest sticking point when talking about the US spec E36 M3. This lowly 3.2-liter inline-six, known as the S52, had just one throttle body, whereas BMW's M Division blessed the European spec S50 with 6 throttle bodies. That means that while we had to settle for just 240 horsepower, the Europeans got 321 German horsepower. But here's the thing, both cars are pretty much the same from 0 to 60. Go ahead, take a second to Google it. It depends on what publication you're quoting, but both had a 0 to 60 time in the mid 5-second range.
And that brings us to the transmission. While the US spec E36 M3 had to make do with a 5-speed manual for its entire production run, the European M3 got a 6-speed manual when it was updated for the 1996 model year. But that 6-speed was actually tuned more for economy than performance, so despite having an extra gear and a more powerful engine for the 1996 model year, the M3 Evo is only about a tenth of a second quicker to 60 than its predecessor. So unless you're talking about mileage, there really isn't an advantage to the 6-speed.
But the real kicker is in upkeep. Now both E36 M3s are old German performance cars at this point, so things are going to go wrong. But the S52 motor in this car is much simpler than the S50 fitted to the European model. In the S52, you just have a single Vanos variable valve timing system, whereas the European car had a more complex double Vanos system. And apart from routine maintenance stuff, the S52 is pretty much set it and forget it. It's not uncommon to see these with 200,000 miles or more. In the European car, you have to do things like reset the valve clearance every 30,000 miles.
My last point isn't really a positive or negative for either car, but as of today, the US spec E36 M3 is the only E36 M3 you can legally drive in the United States. The European car won't be eligible for the United States 25-year import rule for a few more years. So since we can't even get it, why not just enjoy our M3 for the masterpiece it is?
And that brings me back to my original assertion that the E36 M3 is a worthy successor to the original E30 M3, which is a point of contention among many BMW enthusiasts. After all, the E30 M3 was a limited edition homologation special with a racing engine and bulging bodywork, and this is more like a warmed over 325i. But the E36 M3 is better than the E30 M3 in every measurable way.
While the E30 M3 had a high-strung racing motor, it was still just a 4-cylinder with 192 horsepower. With 2 more cylinders and nearly 50 more horsepower, the E36 M3 was more than 2 seconds faster to 60 than the E30 M3. And despite a bigger body that added about 400 pounds to the overall weight, the E36 M3 could out-handle and out-brake the E30 M3. And this ushered in new safety features like dual airbags and stability control. And you could get it as a practical sedan or a sun-loving convertible.
Now the E30 M3 certainly looks the part with its box fenders and large rear wing, but I think the design of the E36 M3 has aged incredibly well too. It's classic BMW with chiseled lines and spot-on proportions. And I like that the E36 hails from an era where performance cars didn't have to shout, "Look at me, I'm sporty and angry." There's no fake air vents or silly body kit. In fact, on cars equipped with the luxury pack like this car here, the side skirts are actually the same as a base 3 Series. The only thing that gives this away as a performance car are these 17-inch wheels and the badge on the back. It's true of a lot of cars from this era, but the E36 is just the perfect size. When it came out, it was considered a mid-size sedan, but these days it's no bigger than a compact crossover. And thanks to that small footprint, the E36 is highly maneuverable and really easy to park.
The interior of the E36 wasn't great, but it's also not as horrible as people make it out to be. The materials are actually quite nice, with soft touch on the dash and door cards with this nice graining, and the leather is this thick German-feeling leather. But the bad parts were really bad. For example, the plastic on the glove box tends to warp and bow over time, and some of the door panels are held together with what I can only assume was used chewing gum. And on the Lux Pack cars, the wood tends to crack over time, and as you can see, the center wood trim's already been replaced with plastic in this car. But you can't really knock the E36 for its ergonomics. The steering wheel isn't adjustable at all, not even tilt, but it's really easy to find your perfect driving position. And the radio and HVAC controls are just an easy reach, and the shifter falls right to hand.
And the visibility in this is amazing. There's no sloping coupe-like roofline or anything like that to obscure your visibility. You can just see everything.
And then there's what this car was made to do, drive, and it's really good at it. The steering rack is actually slower than a modern car, but there's just so much feedback. You know exactly what the front wheels are doing at all times. The ride quality is on the firm side, as you expect from a sporty car. What always blows me away is the lack of body roll in this thing. You gotta remember, the E36 was designed right around the start of the 1990s when even the sportiest of cars had some lean through the corners. The fact that BMW managed to get a sedan from that era to corner this flat is really astonishing.
And then there's that straight 6 under hood. It's just perfect in this car. Most modern stuff is so crazy powerful that you can only ever extract a fraction of the engine's potential. But in this, you can really wring it out without having to worry too much about spending the night in jail. And the inline six is just so smooth with torque everywhere. It's great to drive. I think the next two generations of M3 that followed this car, the E46 and E90, were both brilliant. However, each had a fatal flaw. The E46 wasn't available as a sedan, so it wasn't really practical as a family car. The four-door M3 returned with the E90 generation, but its 4.0-liter V8, which was supremely excellent, was unfortunately known for munching rod bearings. And the current F80 M3 has just gone a little bit too overboard. It has blades and wings and body kits everywhere. So then, that leaves this, the second best E36 M3 BMW made, as the best M3 of all time.